Thank you, Sarah. Welcome everyone to the 2023 pre-field season meeting, recognizing, of course, that the field season has already really started. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is David Allen, and I'm a program manager with NOAA's Arctic Research Program and co-lead of the Field Operations Community of Practice for IARPC. I am joining this call from the ancestral homelands of the Anacostan and Piscataway peoples here in Washington, D.C. Next slide, please. I want to, before we go too much further, I want to thank all of our presenters and investigators for contributing to the this field season meeting. I know it is a great deal of effort just to actually put together a field program, let alone putting together all the resources. So it is a big deal and an additional effort to actually contribute to these meetings. But I hope that and understand that most of you understand the value of doing so. I also want to thank our co-sponsor, the Marine Ecosystems Community of Practice, including team leads Jackie Grebmeyer, Danielle Dixon, and Kathy Kuhn, and our other co-sponsor community of practice, the CICE Community of Practice, including Melinda Webster, Angela Bliss, Cynthia Garcia, and Nathan Kurtz. And finally, I want to thank our collaborators at the Field Operations Community of Practice. That includes Renee Crane, Katie Smith, and Sarah Tucker. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, our goals for the meeting today are to provide an open space to share information and identify common themes or potential to work together during planned field activities. We want to also improve the communication and engagement between researchers and Arctic communities. We want to share community-based observing activities and concerns and share research and communications plan with the research community and Alaskan and Arctic coastal communities to avoid potential conflicts. However, we want to make it clear that participation in this pre-field season meeting does not replace researchers being in direct contact with communities prior to and during planning and conducting research, but rather we hope that this will be an additive opportunity to increase communication and knowledge sharing. Next slide, please. We're very excited to announce that the 2023 Research Vessel Matrix was recently launched and can be found at the link that was just placed in the chat. This tool was originally developed in 2016, and since then we have tried to make incremental improvements in this tool in the hopes that researchers would use this information to coordinate activities and that communities would use it to understand what vessels are in their waters and how to contact them if necessary. There are several new aspects to the research vessel matrix, including the calendar view, which you can add to your Google Calendar if you have one. And I believe it's also compatible with other calendars. And we've also increased the reach with mapping and fisheries surveys. So you'll see a great deal more activity that we've tried to capture in the matrix. Excitingly, we're also in an effort to continue to improve what we actually provide to the community. We'll also be adding a mooring locations matrix very soon to the site as well. In addition to the website, there are various places to find information about the matrix, including those listed here. We'll also share the link to sign up for the newsletter now. That should show up in the chat. And for a variety of reasons, not every project engaging in Arctic research vessel-based work will be represented here today, although we've done our best to provide an overview of most of the research projects, and everyone, of course, is welcome to contribute to future pre and post field season meetings and the research vessel matrix. So if you know of folks that are actually conducting field research that aren't represented here, please get them in touch with us, and we'd be happy to include them in future matrices. Next slide, please. As a reminder, it is essential for Arctic researchers to follow the principles for conducting research in the Arctic. Researchers working in the Arctic have a responsibility to respect local and Indigenous cultures and knowledge and advance stewardship of the Arctic environment. We also, in so doing, need to support a safe and diverse and inclusive environment for those on our teams. Research should be a safe and enriching experience for everyone. On the next slide, we're going to provide some useful materials for reference to be considered before and during research in the Arctic, and those should be there in the chat as well. They include a variety of different resources that our colleagues at NSF has developed in collaboration with Battelle, and you'll see them represented here. I'd highly recommend that you avail yourself of all of these. They're really quite elucidating, and I think that we can safely say that NSF has been sort of in the forefront in promoting a safe and inclusive working environment. From here, I'm going to turn it over to Cindy to introduce the flow of today's meeting in more detail. So Cindy, please take it away. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, David. Can you all hear me okay? Fantastic. All right. Hi, everyone. Really excited to see you all in this call. My name is Cindy Garcia. I'm a program manager with the Arctic Research Program at NOAA's Global Ocean Monitoring and Observing. I'm also helping co-lead the Sea Ice Community of Practice at IARPC. All right, so to provide a roadmap for today's meeting, we will first present the summary of the research activities for this year, 2023. All of these are our vessel-based research activities. We will have then 2 rounds of breakout sessions. Again, it's 2 rounds, and you can choose to attend any of the regional discussions on activities happening at either the Gulf of Alaska and South Bering Sea. Second is on North Bering, Chukchi, and Beaufort Seas. And then the third breakout session on North Atlantic Ocean and Pan-Arctic. So we'll have 2 rounds of breakout sessions there for each of those regional discussions. Then we will have Lloyd Pikok Jr., a science liaison and videographer from UIC Science, as well as Bernice Oyagak, an outreach and engagement manager, also from UIC Science. They will speak about ideas and suggestions for improving and enhancing community engagement. This will then be followed by Gay Sheffield, a marine advisory agent for Alaska Sea Grant, who will then speak to building communication plans among scientists and communities. Finally, we will have a community engagement breakout session and then end with some closing thoughts and announcements. So that's our meeting format and agenda for today. And next slide, please. All right, so introductions. So with the research vessel matrix, we recognize that we are mainly capturing marine field operations and not always all of the field operations. However, we do try our best to improve with each iteration every year. We would like to, again, take a moment here to say thank you to all of the scientists and researchers who volunteered and actively provided all of the rich information to this year's research vessel compilation. If you are part of any of the projects that are included in the research vessel compilation or matrix this year, please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat with your name, your affiliation, and the name of your project. Thanks again for your valuable contributions. All right, as you type away your affiliation and your name, introducing yourself to the group, we also welcome members of the communities in Alaska and other parts of the Arctic. Welcome everyone, and we're excited for your engagement and your partnership. So also please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat where you are currently located or where you're residing, and also your affiliation, any affiliation you would like to share. Thank you for participating there and introducing yourself in the chat. All right, as you type away, I will now turn it over to Sarah to provide an overview of some of the science happening this year. Thanks, everyone.
Love to see all the names in the chat. Please keep adding them as we get started. This is the first line of introducing ourselves, and we'll get more acquainted during the breakout rooms. But before that, I'm going to provide a brief overview of the 2023 vessel matrix. I've grouped cruises by topics, and very much so different expeditions could fall into multiple topics. I'll try to show all of the different expeditions that were found on the matrix with special attention to cruises that provided talking points through slides. And those cruises will be marked in bold on the slides presented here. Also, all of these slides will be made available. the slides that we received from some of the scientists will be made available and put on the IARPC website. So the aim of providing this overview is really, again, a launching point for some of the conversations we'll be having later, and is no means fully encompassing the research or the community engagement of the projects discussed. And this year we were definitely more successful in integrating fisheries related projects and surveys in terms of mapping. And so I want to give a special thank you to Jerry Hoff from NOAA's National Marine Fisheries Service and the Alaska Fisheries Service Center, and Meredith Wessington from Seascape Alaska and NOAA's National Ocean Service for helping to coordinate this. So to begin, I've created the group topic of mapping. So Seascape Alaska is a multi-year, multi-partner research campaign aimed at creating high-quality modern seabed data for Alaska waters. And as of 2021, 72% of US waters of Alaska were unmapped. So between May 5th and October 14th on the NOAA ship Okeanos Explorer, exploration and mapping expeditions will take place to collect critical information for deep water area off of Alaska, with a particular focus on the Aleutian Islands, the Aleutian Trench, Bowers Ridge, and the Gulf of Alaska. 5 expeditions will be using a suite of acoustic sonars to map bathymetry, water column, and sub-bottom to fill in gaps of understanding. In addition, 2 of these expeditions will be using remotely operated vehicles, or ROVs, to dive and collect high-resolution imagery and biological, geological, and water column samples. All the operations will be shared in real time with shore-based participants and the general public. In addition to this, there will also be 4 expeditions going out on the fair weather, which will also contribute to Seascape Alaska. Moving on to some of the fish and fisheries related expeditions coming up. As you can see, there's a broad swath of different surveys going out in different geographical locations, as well as focused on different species. So we have some on salmon and some looking at the early life stages of groundfish with the Ethioplankton survey. And I'm going to focus in on the Western Gulf of Alaska juvenile pollock and forage fish survey. And this is going out August 27th through September 12th. It'll be out in the Western Gulf of Alaska near Kodiak Island. The survey will assess abundance and distribution of juvenile groundfish, in particular with a focus on walleye pollock, forage fishes, and their zooplankton prey. The data collected will be used to track and understand impacts of changing ocean conditions on the juvenile stage of fishes, which is a really critical period that affects year class strength. These data in general support ecosystem-based fisheries management by forming the basis of ecosystem indicators, providing early warning signs for shifts in certain ecosystems or species, and contributing to risk assessments for commercial stocks in Alaska. So really excited to see all of the science coming out focused on fisheries. We also have a number of expeditions going out related to more ecosystem level science. And so this is looking at multiple parts of the ecosystem, whether it's physical, chemical, biological, and kind of doing an integrative expedition. And some of these projects have been around for a little while now. So we have the LTER, Resiliency and Environmental Mosaic of the Northern Gulf of Alaska Ecosystem. This is really looking at the drivers and processes that determine resiliency and productivity of the Northern Gulf of Alaska. So how does things like freshwater from rivers influence the marine ecosystem? We have an expedition going out through KOAIR on the ROV Erin, which is led by scientists at COPRI, and we'll be sampling at some of the DBO or distributed biological observatory sites in the Chukchi and Beaufort Seas. And we have the Distributed Biological Observatory and Canada's Three Oceans Project. And this will be out the 5th of July through the 24th in the Northern Bering and Chukchi Seas, with the goal to continue physical, biochemical, and biological time series. And these are established long-term stations that have high biomass and high biodiversity. So they're really critical to the ecosystems in the US Arctic. And this is part of a larger international effort. Some research questions that we'll be that will be looked at during these cruises will be what is the status and change of multiple biological components of the ecosystem in the Northern Bering and Chukchi Seas? And what are the key environmental variables, including seawater warming and reduced sea ice on biological populations? In addition, there's a NOAA Arctic and Ecosystem cruise, and that's in September through October. September 10th through October 4th, and that'll be on the Skoliak. This cruise will support research from the Distributed Biological Observatory, ecosystem fisheries, oceanography investigations, or EcoFoci, the Arctic Marine Biodiversity Observing Network, or AMBON, the Chukchi Ecosystem Observatory, and the NOAA Arctic Research Program. And this is to evaluate the ecosystem status and change at established long-term stations, and to deploy and recover moorings. So some of the questions here that are driving this research are: what are the ecosystem changes occurring in the Northern Bering and Chukchi? What conditions cause marine animal populations to vary? They have some daily communication plans and presentations to the AEWC plan, a planned straight science talk, and some local engagement with community radio and news outlets. We also have the Arctic Challenge for Sustainability, or ARCS 2. They'll have 2 different cruises, one on the RV Mirai, and this will be going out on August 25th through the 4th of October, a long cruise. It'll be in the Bering, the Chukchi, and the Beaufort Seas, and with the main aim of collecting a data set that would allow for a really broad view of the totality of hydrographic and ecosystem changes that are taking place in the Arctic Ocean, and with the hope of facilitating advanced model development to predict the future state of the Arctic. This will look at the impact of inflow of the Pacific origin water into the Arctic and how that changes sea ice and the impact on the marine ecosystem. Integrating knowledge from international collaborators will help to further understand the ocean variability and future predictions of sea ice, as well as marine ecosystem health. And then there is a second cruise through Osharu Maru. Apologies if I mispronounced this vessel's name, but it will be going out June 8th through August 3rd. And this is in the Northern Bering and Chukchi Sea. Its aim is to understand the change in the physical environment and its impact on the marine ecosystem in the Northern Bering and Chukchi Sea. So a lot of great work to have this full in-depth knowledge of what's going on spatially and temporally, and with different looks to the biology, the physical, and also the chemical. We'll have a few mooring expeditions going out as well. So as you can see, there's Ocean Station Papa, which is located in the Gulf of Alaska. There will be some cruises associated to that. One associated to the OOI Irminger, which is in the south of Greenland and the Northwest Atlantic. And we'll also have EcoFoci cruises going out, 2 of them, one in the spring and one in the fall. The spring cruise has already returned, and so hopefully we can hear a bit about how that all went today. And the fall one will be going out in August. And this is an annual survey that provides baseline fisheries and oceanographic data to support sustainable management of living resources in the Bering Sea and in the rapidly changing US Arctic ecosystem. They'll be looking to provide some key data and understanding and monitoring events such as sea ice loss and how the cold pool is changing and how in general this affects the Arctic ecosystem. EcoFoci is a NOAA fisheries and research joint program, and their aim is to understand ecosystem dynamics and provide science that supports management of living resources. Generally, information from these cruises are immediately shared with NOAA fisheries each spring in May, and can help to provide a plethora of products and management decisions. Following that, we have the Bering Strait Mooring Project, and this is going out on the 4th of July to the 14th, so no day off for them on the 4th. They'll be going to the Bering Strait and the southern Chukchi Sea, measuring and understanding change in the oceanic flow through the Bering Strait. And so really the questions that this project is trying to answer are, what are the properties of the oceanic flow through the Bering Strait into the Arctic? And can we measure how much water, what temperature, what salinity, and what nutrient content are in those waters? How are these properties changing over time? And in fact, the data collection started back in the 1990s and since has been showing that the flow is increasing and becoming warmer and more fresh. So I want to highlight a couple of expeditions that are more organism or animal focused. This includes a research cruise on stellar sea lion abundance, on coral settlement plate, the fate of primary productivity in the Chukchi Sea, which is related to microalgae or phytoplankton, as well as the biophysical drivers of bowhead whale distributions. And that cruise, in fact, will be going out August 16th through September 6th, and will be off the Beaufort and Beaufort Shelf and in the Barrow Canyon. So 11 years of work near Point Barrow has demonstrated that there are patches of krill that reliably are found on the shelf in response to local wind forcing and upwelling. And then they are available for prey for bowhead whales. However, since 2015, there were at least 2 years, one in 2016 and one in 2019, when whales migrated too far offshore to be safely hunted. And the scientists here seek to determine if the conditions bringing a reliable supply of krill to Point Barrow and thus whales have been altered during this undergoing and ongoing climate change. So they aim to determine if there have been changes in the availability of krill that could affect bowhead whale migration and distribution. Point. Yes, thank you. Oyagak is a yeah, it's whatever. They plan to present AEWC meeting in July, and they've been in conversation with the whaling captains and presented to the North Slope Borough Mayor and Department of Wildlife Director. We also have Pacific walrus population dynamics. This is another expedition coming up in June 5th through July 2nd. And this will be in the Northern Bering Sea and in the Chukchi Sea. They will be collecting data to model walrus population dynamics. 3 Alaska Native walrus hunters are full research cruise participants. They'll collect biopsy samples from walruses hauled out on sea ice. They'll collect age structure data from walruses hauled out on sea ice and collect biological and physical samples to quantify harmful algal bloom toxin levels, which is an important aspect that we'll hear about a little bit more later. There are a few sea ice related cruises. Some of these will be looking at the Bering Sea shelf. Some will be looking at the Greenland ice sheet, and others will be developing observation capabilities and autonomous platforms through acoustic navigation during ice cover. That's the AMOS project. And finally, Schooliac will be having their annual calibrations. It's a lot of work to make sure all the science goes well. There'll also be a cruise through UNOL's AICC, which is a building Arctic seagoing research capacity. It's a chief scientist training cruise. This will be June 5th through the 13th. It'll be going from Seward to Nome. And its mission is to train the next generation of scientists to conduct research ethically and responsibly in the Arctic and Alaska waters. Early career scientists will collect pilot data and sample data sets to further inform future projects, as well as collaborations. And Lloyd Pikok will also be joining us as a community observer. And there will be a STEM Seas virtual engagement as well. So this is very much a brief overview of some of the cruises that are going out this year. As you can see, there is an amazing group of scientists addressing a vast number of topics and regions within the Arctic. And we are very thankful for the time scientists have dedicated to sharing their research plans and science with us. In order to have the best opportunity to discuss some of the science and the needs and benefits of the scientific investigations and the communities that they will be in, we are going to jump to some regional breakout rooms. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Katie, to provide some instructions for this. Thank you for your time.
Everyone, I am Katie Smith. I work at QED and I contract with the National Science Foundation Arctic Research Support and Logistics Program. So we're going to start some regional breakout rooms. If you need help while in the breakout room, there is the ask button for help. Breakout rooms will not be recorded. So there will be 2 rounds of breakout groups that will be 15 minutes each. Each breakout room will have a moderator and a note taker that have been pre-assigned. Everyone will choose a room for the first round, enter, and enjoy the discussion. We will bring you back to the main room before the second round. So the 3 rooms by region are if you go to the next, or is it? Oh, no, it's good. The Gulf of Alaska and South Bering, the North Bering Sea, Chukchi and Beaufort Seas, and the North Atlantic Ocean and Pan-Arctic. And so, Meredith, can you please set that up for us and let us know when you are ready to let people choose which room they are going to join?
Yep, I am going to open the rooms now.
I'll say her name again for the recording. We have Bernice Oyagak, and she's the Outreach and Education Manager at UIC Science, and she's a whaling captain. And we have Lloyd, the Science Liaison and Videographer for UIC Science, both of whom live and work in Oyagak. I'll turn it over to Bernice and Lloyd now, and thank everyone very much for joining us today.
Thank you for that introduction, Renee, and clarification. I'm not a whaling captain. That would be cool, but I am a whaler.
A whaler, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And Lloyd is here too, and he and I were born and raised in Oyagak, formerly known as Barrow, tip top of Alaska. We work for UIC Science, which is part of the Battelle ARO, Arctic Research Operations. And today we are going to talk about community observers in Arctic research. So thank you for having us, and we're happy to be here to share with you all our experience of having a community observer on board a research vessel, Lloyd, which he will be joining one soon. I want to start off with an attempt for some mutual understanding and some community perception. Many people who live on these coastal communities live a subsistence lifestyle, and the ocean is their garden. So imagine being raised in one of these coastal communities, and it's all you know. You're going to take your children out on the ocean and teach them something your parents taught you, and during that experience, some high-tech ship shows up and they scare your dinner or your seal away, and your family's dinner away, your community's dinner away, because we share with everyone, right? We, especially the elders and the widowed, and you didn't get that moment to pass that knowledge, which is huge. So now you have to go to the grocery store, if there's a grocery store, and buy a Lunchable for your son. If they have it, and if you have the money. Maybe you couldn't go that next day because you didn't have enough money for gas or the swells were too high. And so for many years, these communities have survived with these Western influences, right? Research vessels aren't the first people to show up. We've had commercial whalers, we've had industrial operators, and since then have ingrained with Western influences without diminishing their cultural values. And so they've survived by listening to the environment, to the land, to the ocean and being in harmony with that environment. And it's very, very important to them for anyone to not interfere with what's happening, to embrace what's going on every season. They've taken advantage of those times to do things the right way and to protect their resources. And so in 10 minutes, we're going to define what a community observer is and share our success story and let you know that there's definitely room for more. Slide 2. So what is a community observer? The overall objective is to scan the horizon, maintain at a high level communication between ships, activities, subsistence hunters, land-based stations, to ensure the best of their ability that all conflicts between animals, subsistence hunters, and the ship are avoided to minimize a potential negative impact. I think it's very important to note here that a community observer is not a person who is going to represent every single coastal Alaskan community, and they are not going to communicate some sensitive scientific data that impacts a community. So it's a partnership, right? Research projects will be better if it's in partnership. And it's really like an artwork for someone to do all of this, because you're accomplishing someone's outside endeavors while making sure the subsistence world and activities around them are not impacted. So whoever has a community observer on board needs to know that this person is gonna speak up, and they're gonna tell you not to go this way. They're gonna tell you not to interfere with these people, with these animals. And the research vessel operators must use them in a way to protect our traditional activities. Next slide. So we've been hearing from our communities, we need more community engagement, more outreach from the scientific community. And that's exactly what this is. It's an outreach and engagement by the research and funding communities. Community observers are going to have the knowledge of Inupiat culture and priorities related to research. And now Inupiat culture is going to be speaking for the Northern Natives, because that's where we go. And then they'll have a strong oral and written skills to communicate with stakeholders. So they'll be sending out emails. And then they also are going to be somebody who has experience in subsistence hunting, whaling, or any other marine hunting activity. And we don't just pick anybody. I mean, these people are kinds of people that are going to have a real good handle on subsistence and protecting the habitat. Your ship can make impacts instantaneously, and it might not look like there's anything out there going on sometimes, but we understand that there's life everywhere, and you just have to know where it's at. So the community observer will help guide your operation to minimize its impact. Next slide. Lloyd.
Hi, I'm Lloyd Pikok Jr. I was a community observer aboard the research vessel NyxoLyno last fall from October 31st to December 3rd, something like that. And it was my first role as an observer. I really didn't know what to expect going into it, but once we got on board and things kind of fell into place, and I really kind of understood what the role was starting to look like. And I guess we can start with this video. It answers a lot of questions, and it's fun to watch. It was fun to make, and it kind of outlines how I see an observer role on board a boat. Maybe. Oh, cool.
My name is Lloyd Pikok Jr., and I'm a videographer and science liaison for UIC Science. Recently, I was given the opportunity to be a community observer aboard the research vessel NyxoLyno. This position was funded by the National Science Foundation and operated by UIC Science. The vessel departed from Nome on October 31st, 2022, we sailed all the way up to the Mackenzie River Delta, and we arrived back in Seward on December 3rd, 2022. A community observer has a few different roles on a research vessel. First, the community observer sends daily email updates to a list of contacts from coastal communities that the vessel would be sailing by, as well as the Alaska Eskimo Whaling Commission. The daily email update includes information like the vessel's location, a map of the vessel's travel route, the science plan, a photo from vessel operations, and weather conditions like air temperature, sea surface temperature, and salinity. All of the recipients on the list have the ability to reply to the email and voice any questions or concerns about the vessel's location, science plan, or operations. From there, the vessel crew or the chief of science would react accordingly. The community observer also assists the principal investigator, as well as any other observer on board, with all animal observations and the required reporting. For this cruise, I was equipped with a pair of Vortex high-powered binoculars and a Vortex spotting scope. Lastly, the community observer is greatly encouraged to share their traditional knowledge with the people on board and act as that liaison between Indigenous and Western society. It is through those interactions that the science party and the vessel crew learn about our people and our culture. You know, at every chance I got, I talked about how just mouth-wateringly incredible hot fresh unalik is on the ice, or how important it is for me to share the fish I catch from our beautiful rivers with anyone who needs it. I can't speak for any other research vessel, but the Sukalak goes through great measures to ensure they leave behind as little of a footprint as possible. The stewards grind all food slops, the engineers incinerate all of their waste, and all of this is done nowhere near shore or any coastal community. With the help of the observers, the vessel also steers clear of any animal and its habitat. I would also like to mention that the crew we sailed with had a safety first mentality, and they appreciated and wanted to preserve the Arctic as much as we do. I do have some advice for future observers. First, get really good with a camera. Not only will it help you document memories and moments from the trip, it'll also come in clutch when you're trying to identify animals. The animals you encounter when you're underway happen so fast, you may not be able to get a good look through your binoculars. That's where the camera comes in. If you're able to photograph, let's say, a bird in flight, you'll be able to go back to that image and look for any identifying marks on the bird's head or body. This is the process we use to make our first positive identification of a spectacled eider, which I thought was pretty cool. Second, be prepared for slow days, but don't be afraid of them. There will be times when you're doing absolutely nothing, and it's in those moments that you can have your greatest impact as a community observer. You'll be able to tell your favorite hunting stories, you'll be able to share your favorite photos, you'll be able to talk about home or other places you've been, and it's through those stories and moments the people on board really get to learn about the Arctic, and not just the science of it. They get to learn about us, our people, and just the pure passion we have for living here. And as a bonus, you'll also become the coolest person on board. Not only that, you'll get to share your favorite moments from the cruise with the people in your community. You know, they'll get to see the stuff you get to see, and they'll hopefully be reminded of how incredible the Arctic is wherever you're at. With all of your stories and all of your imagery, more and more people will become familiar and understand why we love living here, what makes this place incredible. They'll get to see firsthand that the Arctic is more than just a research lab and a travel destination. And something that I found important for me is the people in your community will hopefully get to see how responsible research in the Arctic can be done. Lastly, do not become too dependent on seasickness remedies. When they say everyone gets seasick, everyone gets seasick. You are going to run out of Dramamine, the patch, ginger snaps, whatever you bring. You're going to run out. It's going to suck. You know, you're going to feel like the sky is falling, the room is spinning. You're going to regret every decision you ever made that wanted to make you get on that boat. But in the end, even through the seasickness, it'll all be worth it.
Thank you, Lloyd.
Good job, Lloyd.
I hope that kind of gives a very brief overview of my experience being an observer. I do have a couple more points I'd like to talk about. Like Bernice said, we're all subsistence hunters, and if anything, hunters are professional observers. We spend a lot of hours scanning the horizon, looking for life, things like that. For an example, I was just at a whale a few weeks ago where if we didn't have someone scanning the horizon, looking for bears specifically, things may have turned out a little differently. Luckily, we had a guy on bear watch. He spotted 2 bears. He kept an eye on them, and ultimately, we had to scare them away. But it's just that kind of experience, you can't get anywhere else but here. And that's why I think we should have people from these communities on vessels so they can share experiences like that and, ultimately have a safer and successful cruise. A few more things. A lot of the people from the communities are CIS experts. I'm not, but there's a lot of people who know a lot more about CIS than I do. And like Thomas, for example, he's going on a cruise this spring, and he spends a lot of time on the ice. He's really knowledgeable about the different types of ice, marine life. And so I'm really happy he's going on a cruise this summer so he can share his incredible stories and experiences with his, that science party. I also think it's really important to keep communities in the loop of just the science that's happening ultimately in their backyard, right? On my cruise, we had access to the internet, so I was able to scroll through just, my personal social media. And when we sailed to Barrow, just like clockwork, there were tons of photos taken of our, the navigational lights on the horizon, and everyone was wondering, oh, who's this? What's this? But because I was on the boat, I was able to answer those questions, and I even saw that people from my contact list were, they beat me to it. They were able to be like, oh, that's the research vessel Sukulak, and they're doing this, this, and this. And so, people do read those emails, and they're not just ignored. And I did receive a couple replies, nothing negative or like, get away from here. They're just curiosities, from scientists here. And my uncle TK, he's on the AWC board. He replied a few times and was like, thanks, Juke. So, those emails do get read, and I just think that's really cool. And I personally believe that having a familiar name tied to those updates kind of opens up that channel of communication and conversation. So yeah, that's really all I had to share. If anyone has any questions.
Sorry, can we take a couple questions?
Yeah, let's take a couple and then we'll move on.
Great. If anyone has questions, you can go ahead and raise your hand. Go ahead, David.
I guess it's less of a question and more of a comment to program managers and chief scientists writ large. The practice of actually bringing on community observers sort of fell off during the pandemic for obvious reasons, but this seems like a pretty clear message that we should be considering how to reinstate that practice and include community observers where possible. I think Lloyd and Bernice made a very strong case, and very impressive video and very impressive comments. Thank you so much. Yeah.
And I think in our practice, we want to see community observers, especially on cruises that are in and around and spending some time near coastal waters. I think on the occasions when we've sent vessels to the North Pole or something far, far away, there haven't even been community observers who really wanted to go. Because it's fun to be where there's wildlife and to be in that more biologically active area, but it's not to say that there couldn't be one to also report back to communities, but the focus is on the coastal cruises, which there are a lot of. And hopefully by having this matrix that's been available, we're trying to make it a more user-friendly tool. People in communities will be aware of what ships are there. If they see lights at night, they'll be able to easily figure out who it is or email a point of contact quickly. And that, but even better than that is to have the community observers on board who can answer questions, who have a distribution list that messages are going out to in real time. And then not to forget the follow-up piece, to come back to communities after your cruise is over. And your community observer might also be a good person to help you make connections or to even attend that follow-up session or community visit and help make the presentations to the communities as well. I would say that NSF has a pretty good system in place. That's who's because we are working with UIC Science through our contract with Patel. And if other federal agencies want to talk to me about how they can leverage our process that we have in place, you can always reach out to me or to Frank Rack. I'll put Frank on the spot. We'd be happy to help, and maybe we can do something on a reimbursable basis or something if you don't have your own mechanism. So we think it's very important. I think that we should probably move on in the interest of time. I really want to thank Bernice and Lloyd for your time and for sharing a lot of really important points and reasons why to become an observer, reasons why to have an observer, and how to do better communication with communities. So thank you very much. And
Thank
now,
you.
yeah, I'll turn it over to Danielle. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Danielle Dixon. I work for North Pacific Research Board based in Anchorage, Alaska, and I also serve as a co-lead of the Marine Ecosystems Community of Practice. And it is my pleasure today to introduce Gay Sheffield. She's a University of Alaska Fairbanks, Alaska Sea Grant Marine Advisory Program agent based in Nome, Alaska. And we've invited her to share some thoughts about best practices for communication, for communicating your research to people in Alaska communities. And Gay played a really important role last year in helping facilitate appropriate communication among researchers and Alaska communities and regional health networks with respect to a harmful algal bloom event last year. And we hope she'll share some information about lessons learned from that as well. So with that, Gay, I will turn it over to you. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. So my name is Gay Sheffield. I'm the Sea Grant agent here in Nome with UAF. I am a public servant to the Bering Strait region. And I don't know, Bering Strait region. And UAF Northwest Campus is where I'm housed in Nome, and UAF Alaska Sea Grant and Northwest Campus, we are public servants of the Bering Strait region, and we serve all peoples of the Bering Strait region, which is the homeland and waters of the Yupik, St. Lawrence Island Yupik, and Inupiaq peoples. So before I get going, I just want to say that I was 10 minutes. Can you give us communication plans in 10 minutes? So it's going to be a trick to do that, but I am going to talk about the response for the 2022 harmful algal bloom. But right off the bat, when I first got asked to do this, I was like, oh, a checklist. This is probably going to be like a checklist, but it won't be like that at all. But know that my checklist, when I hear people want to communicate, I'll just say it right off the bat, is there's 3 things I look for or ask when people come to the region. And that is, what is your objective by communicating? And I'm talking about the research community. What is your objective? Is it conflict mitigation? I mean, let's know what it is. Is it education? Is it all of it? Is it to get information? What is your objective? Who are your audience? And then lastly, what is your measurable of success. How are you going to measure whether or not you had effective communication? So I'll get to that at the end, but no, those are the quick three for me. And I also want to make one correction. I was given a nice introduction, but everything that I'm going to talk about was also in conjunction with the Norton Sound Health Corporation, Office of Environmental Health. We team together in the Bering Strait region, always. And so we are a small region. So there's also last year, the Coeric Subsistence Division head was an unoccupied position. So we were not able to grab Coeric and bring him in, but now they've hired Chuck Manadaluk. And so we are now 3 entities working together on a whole bunch of issues. And we're really glad to have Chuck on board as well. So with that, let's get started. Go ahead. All right. For those who work in Western and Northern Alaska, know that there are 6 regional communication, transportation, and governmental hubs. Except for the Bering Strait region, we do not have a governmental borough in place that is operational. So we are an unorganized borough. But the rest of it, you should know where those stars are and who those are. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's the Bering Strait region, and I put it in the hub for the Bering Strait region, which is its own unorganized borough, or called the Nome Census Area, which is terrible, is the headquarters is in Nome. That's the transportation and communication hub. And the 20 tribes that are located in 16 villages utilize Nome as the communication and transportation hub. We are on the border with Russia, and we're going to auger into that yellow box. Next slide. All right. There has been occupation of the Bering Strait region for over 5,000 years, continuous occupation. So know that when people are trying to, and for lots of reasons, which we don't have time for here, know that the federal and state government has not been very robust in their long-term research in the Northern Bering Sea and Bering Strait region. What I'm trying to make with this slide is a lack of scientific Western science data does not mean there isn't a lack of knowledge in the region on either side of the border. And all those little dots, and they're color-coded for a reason, the yellow actually are in the Bering, what we would call the Bering Strait region, and are under Nome. All those are where people live all the time. So you can imagine we're not out in the middle of nowhere, and there's a lot of people in the region with a lot of knowledge. Next slide. We are rich, biologically, fantastically rich, or have been up until recently. And you can imagine that the priority concerns in a subsistence heavy region is going to include food security, the ability to get healthy, numerous, comprehensive ecosystem resources, everything from tunicates to walrus to the bowhead. And the concerns are, is that wildlife healthy? Are the populations healthy? Is the food healthy? Next slide. And I have to say that we've learned through experience, and this we'll hit on, is that when researchers come from far away, urban-based, meaning to me, that means Anchorage, Seattle, Washington, D.C., wherever you are, that's a big road-connected city. If you are doing research, different kinds of research, of course, and any kind of response, like the HAB22 harmful algal bloom event, you will be most effective when you integrate into the existing regional communication networks. Next slide. All right. So I don't know how many people already know this, but I was asked to talk about this bloom event. And the bloom event was offshore. There was a NOAA and Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute led cruise on the Norseman 2 from July to September, early September. It was novel. There's never been such a dedicated cruise. Frank Rack, yes, NSF funded, thank you. And goal was novel. There's never, my understanding, there had never been a research cruise dedicated sediment to water column looking for the harmful algal bloom. The ship had two goals. It was two legs to it. It started in Nome, it ended in Nome. It made two trails. It went from Nome over to St. Lawrence Island. You can see that that's what's going on, what's showing you on the left. And you can see that the blue colors, they were looking for harmful algae and they found it. And this is a series of figures that show the amount of Alexandrium catenella that they were coming across. And know that you don't have to be an expert, but anywhere that you see yellow on the two trips that the ship made from Nome to Oyagak and back, anything that is yellow or orange or red is dangerous. That was a harmful algal bloom event. And the yellow is in the 20 to 40,000 cells per liter, which they get concerned at 1,000 cells per liter. And in the red was over like 100,000 cells per liter of Alexandrium, which produces a very potent nerve toxin called saxitoxin, which can lead to paralytic shellfish poisoning in warm-blooded animals, including people. And so what was interesting about this is this was a cruise that started and ended in Nome, so we don't always see that. The results of this research, and this was kind of new for us to wrap our head around with what happened, the results of this cruise, potentially lethal. Their research has information real time on board that could mean life or death to someone eating subsistence foods, and certainly to the marine resources like a walrus that are eating clams, which can concentrate that Alexandrium, concentrate that saxitoxin in its belly. So when the walrus comes and eats the clam, right, the walrus will be affected. And what also was helpful was that the urban-based principal investigators, the cruise leaders, the project leaders were experienced. So they had worked in Oyagak, they'd worked in the Bering Strait region before. They were open to regional input. They did check in. Mind you, it was like right before the ship left, but they were open to regional input, and they were open to adapting their communication plans. Next slide. Okay, so the communication plan was, the way it finalized quickly was the objective, hearing that, they were worried about these finding such a thing as a harmful algal bloom. So the objective in our minds here in the region was, okay, protect human health. That was our objective in the communication plan. The second was, we know our audience. Those are going to be the communities at risk, wherever they find this. And three, we would measure success by having an informed public in our region. And again, I'm only speaking on the Bering Strait region. And we could talk more about this at length, but we are out of time. Next slide. Okay, so we had the ship call in, and they went right off the bat. They went west of Gamble on the first leg. Holy cow, 20,000 cells per liter. We thought that was terrible, or they thought that was terrible. And then, it just got worse as they kept looking. But know that the first thing that we did was, and this was because the ship had made contact with the regional hub. And for those who are maybe managers or looking at this from a health standpoint, imagine what would have happened if they hadn't connected in with the regional communication network, because boom, they call in and they say, holy cow, we have a problem. What do we do? I mean, let's go. So the plan was, I don't know why there's a triangle and an exclamation point on my slide, but know that there's Norton Sound Health Corporation and Alaska Sea Grant would be the logo there. We were the regional responders, and of course the Alaska Harmful Algal Bloom Network was the Anchorage responder. But the first thing that was done immediately and was the greatest relief to us here was initiating the Alaska Department of Public Health. So Norton Sound Health Corporation and the Department of Public Health boom, contacted, and they within 24 hours, because we do have communication networks here, and we do have crises, and COVID is a good example, and we work through those, and we practice for all kinds of things. Between the Norton Sound Health Corporation and the Department of Public Health, we had every single clinic stood up in our 16 coastal communities, with signs, with the people that are there. Let me just make one comment. Thank you. With the clinics stood up so that the responders in each remote community would know the symptoms. I mean, that was a great relief to us. And as the ship progressed north and the harmful algal bloom progressed north into other regions with other regional hubs, they had the benefit of pulling in from Norton Sound Health Corporation, a neighbor, and the Department of Public Health. And if something had happened to the North Slope Borough, the waters of the Northern Chukchi, which is actually where I think they thought this would occur, the Samuel Simmons Hospital, the North Slope Borough, Department of Public Health, boom, would have the benefit of having already the neighbors they could tap into, as well as the Department of Public Health, all heading their way, all able to give information. So that to us was a great relief. Here on the ground, we were able to, you can see the arrows going to updating the tribes, the North Slope Borough. We started talking to everybody. We were helping the ship, which was producing advisories. We were helping them with their edits to be more, less maybe scientific, but still have the message, you know, the wording, but still have the message. And then we started initiating more seawater and seafood sampling to try to get at what's going on near shore. Next slide. Okay, I'll go quickly through these. Also from Norton Sound Health Corporation and myself working together, and we've got Queric on board this year as well, now that they have a person in the position. So we hit it hard. We went through newsletters, our local newspaper, radio, hitting our regional media to reach our regional audience. Next slide. We flew out to communities, Emma Pate with the Norton Sound Health Corporation Office of Environmental Health and myself, to sit down and answer questions, explain what's going on. What is a harmful algal bloom? This was a novel event to this region. We are still trying to figure out, you know, how to make sure we are all brought up to speed. And we have a whole host of questions with the different subsistence foods that are not typically of concern for other parts of the world that the government understands. They say, don't eat shellfish. Well, that's one thing. There's problems with saying to people, don't eat shellfish, but okay, if you say don't eat shellfish, don't eat shellfish. But what about the soft tissues of marine mammals that may be tainted, or seabirds that may be tainted? No data on that. Next slide. We also, in the Bering Strait region, we do not have our federal presence in the Bering Strait region is the post office, the FAA, the National Park Service staff for one park on the Northern Seward Peninsula, and seasonally the U.S. Coast Guard. I work with them for other marine mammal work, and we dedicated a flight at the height of this to try to get to and got to Diomede directly when it was at the highest, over 100,000 cells per liter, and they were telling us anybody eats a clam, it's going to be bad potentially. And so we flew out to Diomede using whatever resources we could grab to notify people and bring them up to speed on what's happening and encourage the phone trees. Next slide. Okay. I had a slide, but I guess I didn't send it. That we did actually have transboundary communications, because one thing, if you live in the Bering Strait region, we share all marine resources. We share the water. We are very closely situated, very closely situated. So when we have something that is telling us there is harm in the water, potentially in the foods that may cause you ill health or worse, we are going to try to share that. To do that, I won't get into the details in this phone conversation, but know that it has been done, and you want to be working not with necessarily NGOs. You definitely want to be working. I would say you don't want to be working with anyone who isn't involved with homeland security or the military. You need, at this point in the Bering Strait region, what's going on geopolitically is serious, and you cannot just make random hits out to. Don't mess with that. Make sure you know what you're doing before you get involved in that. But also know this year in Nome, we are going to employ more our radios. So we have some radio stations here in Nome that are regionally based. We're going to translate. If we have a HAB event, we're going to be translating into the different dialects of the region, the different languages of the region, as well as Russian, and be broadcasting specifically to Russia so they can hear as well. And we will employ other means as well. So to summarize, because this was only 10 minutes, know the objective of your communications, know your audience, or find out who that is, and have a measurable of success so you know whether you hit the target or not. What was really different about this situation was the ship was in and out of Nome. The PI and project leads were experienced with reaching out, and because I'm old, we'd all sort of knew each other from other things. So they were willing and adaptable and knew to reach out. And know that when you're doing, this was unusual because this kind of research has immediate health concerns. And I don't know, we're wrapping our heads around that. And I hope that those of you back in the leadership positions are also wrapping your heads around that as well, because we really, this is an extreme example. We need to have more integration and better comms. Personally, I think it needs to be chunked out regionally or around the regional hubs, because all our regions, all the way down to the Eastern Aleutians, is, we all have different things. And I also want to give a shout out to Lloyd Pikok. Great video, and also good to see your face. I see you on those emails, but I never seen you, so very good. So know that the response to a dangerous situation, or even your research, if you're doing research that doesn't involve human health, know that your research is really going to be more effective if you're utilizing the knowledge, double checking, asking. If you're utilizing the knowledge that is in each region that is massive, you will have better, the science will be better, the management of resources will be better. And I just can't encourage that enough. Communicate, but it needs to be done well. With that, next slide. Thank you. We're walking into 2023 in the Bering Strait region. Here we are not as financially or politically robust as other regions, but down here we do the best we can with what we have, and we always ask for help. And that's what we're doing going into 2023. It is slow, right? The government is slow and research is slow to sort of shift things to respond. But I have to say we are getting attention from and some help. We'd like things yesterday, but that's okay. People are on the case, and I appreciate having the opportunity to speak up here. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Gay. That was wonderful. Thank you. Thanks so much. So we're going to take a good 5 to 10 minutes and provide an opportunity for folks to ask questions of Gay and or Bernice and Lloyd as well about best practices for communication. And I'd like to start it off with one quick question for Gay. Thank you. That was really, really important information. And everyone's thinking ahead to this coming field season and what may be happening with respect to harmful algal blooms. And one question I have for you, Gay, is if you could say a few words about best practices for communicating via social media with people in communities if you're on board a research vessel. I think it's important to be careful about scaring people off of subsistence foods, but you also want to, get information out to people in communities quickly if there could be a potential dangerous situation. So I'm hoping that everybody gets the message about going through the regional communication networks and the local health organizations. about communicating, but should people stay away from putting any post out on social media about this these type of results? Thanks.
So thank you, Danielle. You confused me a little bit because there's only, my understanding is Sikuliak's got we do have a communication plan in place for Sikuliak in the event that there is harmful levels found again. I don't know of any other vessels that are doing harmful algal bloom real-time data. So if there is that, I don't know who gathers, who's doing everything, but that's certainly not at this level. And yes, if there's a way to get that, but so we have a communication plan, and I think we're going to stick with that. Know that that is also with Kotzebue, and Oyagak is aware of the communication plan too. So I'm not really sure how to answer your question. Are you saying like social media, someone would post something? Could you give me an example?
Sure. So just in general, if if cruises are going out and they have somebody who's excited about, communicating via Facebook or that sort of social media about what's happening aboard a cruise, and they happen to take a plankton sample that looks like, oh, wow, there's a potential high level of a HAB species here. What's your advice for, holding back on sharing that kind of information via Facebook as opposed to letting it go through the health network?
I guess I'm confused. So if somebody, I don't think the science community does that, says, oh, there's one little piece of data, and then just blurts it out to the public, but maybe they do say that happens. I wouldn't recommend somebody say there's a bloom when there isn't. And I don't think anybody here in this call would probably be like that. So I'm not sure what you're, normally the concern I have is if there's on social media, if people we have had in the past, and I'm saying this is a thing in the past, but it has been a problem where you see research vessels posting pictures, or people on board research vessels posting pictures of disturbing walruses, or, that sort of thing, where they're getting really close. There's certain rules, as we heard from Bernice and Lloyd, this is food. And there's certainly federal laws about disturbing some of these animals. That would be the kind of thing I would definitely say, don't be doing that. And then, and I think people have gotten that message, but in the past, that's the sort of thing I would say, you'd see it on social media. And I think the people who are doing research on marine mammals and have a permit have takes on animals certainly understand and have rules when they get their permit of how they are to conduct themselves. So, but you're still specifically on HABs, or?
It was specifically about, or other potential human health.
If you are at sea and you think you have something that is life-threatening to a human being, contact the Alaska Department of Public Health without question. Contact the U.S. Coast Guard if you don't know how to get a hold of the Department of Public Health. If you're new to Alaska, whatever, let your boat operator know. They will know how to get to an emergency. Anything to do with public health is a serious thing. So there's, there's liability issues actually at some point. So I would make sure that you contact someone. If you think there's people's lives are in danger, get a hold of the right kind of responder, a human health or a, emergency responder like the Coast Guard. They will know what to do and who to contact. Alaska Department of Public Health, well aware. Get a hold of the Norton Sound Health Corporation. Get a hold of the Samuel Simmons Hospital if you're in the North Slope Borough. Get go to Manila. Go to someone big who's in Alaska who understands, like the Coast Guard, and they will start. There's a thing called the Rescue Coordination Center in Juneau. They are wonderful. If you think there's an emergency and you need to tell people about it, they know how to disseminate that information to the proper You only call them when you have concern for human safety and health. But do it. I hope that answers that.
Thank you, Gay. It looks like Ben has his hand up, and then Renee. Go ahead, Ben.
Oh, thank you for allowing us to ask questions of the presenters and those who are participating within this meeting today. You mentioned earlier before I ask my questions that we're going to take a break, or are we asking questions now?
Yes, go ahead with your question.
Oh yeah, thank you. Thank you again, Gay, for being a powerful ally within the Bering Strait regions and for Inuit Nunat as a whole. And thank you, UIC staff, for that important information and highlighting the importance of meaningful engagement of Indigenous peoples within Alaska. I had a couple of questions for Gay regarding the HAB event that occurred last year. One, is there a publication or a report that is available online or publicly available, or through any source rather? And how do we access that?
So I'll put a link in. The best that I know of with the most immediate, there is that we were hitting the Nome Nugget, and the Nome Nugget, it takes a long time for the researchers to on board with HABs. They can get the cell counts, but they have to do the toxin analysis back in their lab, right? So here goes the time. So we were being told, well, this is really high level, and it turned out, and I'll put the link in the chat here as soon as I, am off the hotspot. So yeah, and it turns out when they got the toxin, we were correct to be alarmed. The toxin makes it one of the most toxic. It was, unfortunately, there's many different kinds of saxitoxin. I'm not a HAB expert, but of all the types of saxitoxin that is produced by Alexander Catanella, this was actually the most toxic cocktail of primarily the worst, or strong, most potent. So I'll put that link in, but yes, you have a good point. Where do you go to get this? Where do you go to cite this sort of stuff as you're making reports or proposals or whatever you need to do? So it is yes. So we'll let you know, but
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You bet.
And so a follow-up question then, I'm glad you mentioned very briefly the stratification effects from events such as these that would affect various levels of the food web. And that would be a great starting point to really develop those questions and dialogue further amongst not only researchers, but within Indigenous communities, because we rely upon the various species that utilize not only the ocean, but coastal areas and other environments. And so that cumulative impact of consuming algae with toxins in them is going to have that long-term effect. So I'm just thinking ahead as far as planning and to collect that data and then publish it as, take time, but publish it quickly so that we can make informed decisions in the future. So I'm glad you brought that up and thinking ahead. And so thank you for that. And to go back really to the comms plan, I just want to say thank you, not only to you, but also Daniel. It's good to see you. This is the very start. The communication venues that and hubs that you're referring to and involving Indigenous peoples has been the very beginning, and it's now evolving to be engaged further in involving Indigenous peoples in for the co-production of knowledge. So my question then is, moving forward, is there going to be an evolution of that meaningful engagement, not only with yourself, Gay, but with also other organizations, so that it could benefit the people rather than research being presented? Where could we utilize that data to benefit Indigenous communities? And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much. So, and very nice to get a visual as well. So two things. One is you talked about looking to the future. I would also recommend looking to the past. We have so much knowledge, and so far we really I haven't seen any research, because, you know, this blew really up much more than people expected when they did their research. And so we were running to catch up. So one, you know, also besides the future where, all right, I'll start with your future, is that we need data on if a walrus or a bearded seal has eaten a high level. And we know that there has been evidence, data there that show they are tainted. What does that mean if you harvest one and he's not fully out of it yet? So he's may have been the last one to leave the ice. You get him. And then what does it mean? The meat and blubber don't look to be reserves. You know, the turnaround time's too slow for that. But what about liver, kidney, intestine? This hasn't been thought about. You know, that's why I was trying to say, when they say, oh, well, just don't eat shellfish, you know, watch out for crab and clam. And of course, we have full utilization of the ecosystem here. So tunicates, marine worms, you know, there's not a, yeah, but something so novel as to how does this affect people eating soft tissue and organs, that there's some seabird work that shows that may retain, those items may retain the saxitoxin, you know, and this is, you can't cook it out, you can't freeze it out, you can't age it out. So there's a lot of research to be done moving forward. I agree with the human health aspect. I don't answer to human health, you know, myself, I'm not a researcher on that, but for the animals, with high conservation and food importance throughout the region. And I would say, look to the past, like, has this happened before? We have a place name in the Bering Strait region, which when you translate the place name, it's a place where several people died during a red tide event. So, you know, when was that? There's no date on that, but we have a long history of occupation in the Bering Strait region. So I think about that, tap into that. We have transboundary issues, right? ICC, you guys are one of the few that Chukotka, right? And we've got issues there. So anyway, I appreciate that. The thing I would say also is the ship provided a service. When you were talking about community, to answer your second part, that this research vessel it provided a service. It provided a service that we would not have known about offshore, because we're not know who's sampling offshore. This was a very important, when you're talking about the nexus or how we're all going to start to engage and communicate, I think one of the things is when science provides a service, you're going to get engagement. You're going to get communications. You're going to get education both ways. Science providing a service. Science in this case provided a vital service to us to let us know that that was there. Working together, luckily, and we had a lot of luck in this situation, luckily the researchers were familiar with a hub because they'd worked primarily up in the north. Luckily, we kind of knew each other, so it was easy to communicate and whatnot. Luckily, the ship was there. All things, luckily, no one got hurt. That's the big take home. And I don't know if we hadn't known about that and we just went about our business. We know that there was a clam that turned out to be 5 times over the seafood safety limit with saxitoxin that was going to be fed to a 1.5-year-old girl in one of our communities. And only because it was a beautiful clam they got unexpectedly, a 6-inch surf clam, huge. And everybody was excited to take it home and give it to the baby. And get the taste of the good food. It was healthy clam, good food. But there was a discussion in the boat. We're hearing from like Emma and Gay. Have you heard about this thing? We lose, and so they said, let's send it. Well, no. They sending the clam in, one out. That clam, 5 times over the seafood safety limit. That was August 28th. There was no ship data for that. That ship was north of Diomede. We all here lose sleep thinking how close that came. And going into the future, we are, you can imagine. So anyway, I just wanted to let you know there were close calls. What does it mean for our food security issues here? What's it mean for our neighbors to the west? We still have a lot of questions. I hope that helps.
It does. Thank you. Appreciate it again. And thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I just want to make two points. One is it is important to return to communities and share back information in ways. It's amazing and excellent when researchers publish their research in academic publications, but it's really important to bring messages back to communities. And also I put a link in the chat to a place on the Battelle ARO website where we have interaction plans for some things that people, researchers or cruises may encounter while they're out. And there's some discussion within our group to develop one for HABs to collect that information and have a 1 or 2 pager that people can have access to that says, if you encounter something in these areas, contact these people. And so people have real phone numbers, real-time contacts for the field. But some of the things that are on the website already include polar bear interaction plans, eider interaction plans, marine mammal avoidance, and also for people working in terrestrial environments, how to recognize cultural resources if they're on the land. So these are some resources. I think somebody mentioned in the chat wanting to put that in their cruise plan, what to do if they encounter something. And being proactive is really a better place to be. So it's good that we know each other. These kinds of meetings are good so we get to see each other's faces and know who the other people are so that in real time we have a better chance of communicating effectively. Go ahead, Gay.
Yeah, I would, thank you, Renee. NSF is federally funded and a federal agency. And I see a lot of federal agencies here, and it's almost as if though, should there not be something that the funders are helping the crews, the researchers for a particular cruise with certain overarching things. I mean, it's statewide. If you see dead marine mammals, report to, and there is a report, a federal reporting. And I say that because I think it would help. And when all these different communication networks are started, it can actually confuse the existing regional communication.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting any different communication.
Okay.
network. It's the whole idea would be to point people to the existing.
Yeah. Yeah. And who does that? I think that would be something that the federal side of the house that's providing all these researchers the opportunity to go out in the vessel. They don't maybe have time or knowledge to know to chase all that down. Maybe that's something that can be provided. Just a thought. Thank you.
David, are you bringing us home? We're a little over time.
No, I was just going to intervene. I actually think this is a great conversation. And for those who actually do need to jump off, of course, please feel free. But I could talk about this this work all day, and would be happy to continue the conversation for those who are able to stay with us. Obviously, I want to respect people's time, though, and give people an opportunity to graciously bow out and continue on with their day, and perhaps move on to Memorial Day related activities, since it is virtually the weekend. The only thing I was going to say to Gay's comment was that yes, we do have a responsibility in the federal government to work with our PIs and make sure that they're complying with these expectations and developing communications plans, and we essentially make sure that resources are in front of them, that we're interfacing with the appropriate officials, whether it's compliance with the Marine Mammal Protection Act, whether it's Endangered Species Act, et cetera, et cetera. So we work with our folks to develop those plans before they go out, and now we're in this era where as indicated by your presentation, where research is now relevant in real time, which is sort of an unusual place to be, but yes, we're adapting and learning how to work and communicate with communities in real time again, to alert them of any dangers to public health and beyond. So we're evolving with the rapidly evolving climate as well. And I hope, yeah. So I hope you understand that we're not leaving folks to fend for themselves and make up or respond to these challenges on their own without support.
Thank you. This is Gay.
Okay, well, we're a little bit over, but we thank everyone. We thank the speakers, Gay, Lloyd, Bernice. Big round of applause. And thank you so much for all your time. And I want to thank the scientists who provided resources and shared their plans with us today, and to everyone from being here and kind of exploring this new format for the pre-field season meeting. We're really excited to have had such engagement and had the opportunity to have more discussions, and we hope to provide more time for that in the future. So I hope everyone has a great day, and thank you so much.